Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of Fighters, Coaches, and Fathers. And it is my absolute pleasure to have someone I've known for a very, very long time on the podcast today, Phil Koldyk. Phil, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Jeff. How are you?
Excellent. Phil is a pro wrestler, is a pro MMA fighter, and is originally kind of from the Priaries, where we're all from, and has recently moved to British Columbia, out in Penticton now. And you've been an MMA ref now for how long?
10 years.
Wow! Happy anniversary. That's amazing.
Yeah, that actually just dawned on me that it's been 10 years. Wow.
It's awesome. But as we always look for guests, with interesting stories. And when I talked to Kelly Mars, he's one of the guys that works with us here. He says, you got to interview Phil. He's been doing a lot of things with a lot of different fighters. And he's had an interesting career. And he also said, and I had the opportunity to spar with him kickboxing for 3 weeks. And I have the nightmares every night because I knew I had to go up against him. If you guys can't see, Phil's a massive Andre the Giant type guy who's 6'7" and can hit you.
Hey, don't sell me short there, Jeff. I'm 6'11".
See, even I can't believe it. But if you've ever wanted to fight a pterodactyl, I think just go ahead and ask Phil to do some scripts. So great to have you and on the show. But let's talk a little bit about Phil and growing up in Manitoba and your parents and your early childhood, that kind of thing.
Just growing up on a farm. My parents were farmers out in a small town of 325 people, and I think that actually counted every dog, cat, and pet, because I don't know where they could possibly have fit 325 people in that town. Going through school there, graduated my graduating class of 11. So yeah, it was a pretty rural upbringing.
I'm sorry.
It was great. Actually, I wouldn't change much of it for anything. To be able to be involved in more sports growing up would have been good. It was a little bit of hockey and then whatever kind of intramural sports we had at school, which wasn't much.
Yeah, I hear you. How did you make the decision, or how did it all come that you got to Saskatchewan from Manitoba?
I was working for a crew that was building sheds for Good On Industries years ago, and we did a lot of work in Saskatchewan, and ended up actually meeting a girl from just north of Regina. And then coming up fall, I took one too many steps on the scaffold and lawn darted myself into the ground and broke my arm, and I got a pretty good concussion and whatnot, so I was off the rest of the year, and it was by Regina when it happened. And so instead of going back to Manitoba, where there wasn't necessarily a whole lot for me, I decided to move to Saskatchewan then, and did my rehab and everything in Regina. And then things ended up not working out with the girl, but I was finishing up my rehab in Regina thinking, okay, well, I'm going to carry on and do like every other Manitoba boy and head off to Calgary. But I decided, well, I better check out Regina a little bit. And I actually, the first week I was going around, I got offered 23 different jobs in a week.
Give me an example of which were the ones that you were like, that's ridiculous, and because that doesn't happen anymore. What's going on?
No, and it was crazy, and it was like everything from pipe fitters, welders, collections, bartender, waiter, everything else. And I actually ended up taking the job working as the assistant manager at a brew pub.
Nice.
And that was a good year, but I had done enough time in a bar. I was, it wasn't what I was going for. And
as the assistant manager, Phil, did you most of the time end up having to stay late and do some bouncing?
It was, I honestly, probably in the 11 months that I was there may have been one fight while I was working. Yeah. It was a pretty low key, pretty chill. pretty chill place. So, but I was there late a lot, often until the sun was coming up in the morning, because as you may know, most bar staff don't necessarily go straight home after work and end up drinking until the sun comes up, and then get out when the cleaners show up. And that's kind of like the alarm clock, is when the cleaners show up to clean the place, it's like, oh shit, we better get out.
I gotta beat it back to work in 3 hours.
Yeah.
No, I had lots of friends that have been in that situation. Unfortunately, usually I'm the guy trying to stay with the staff, or used to be back in the day.
Yeah.
So you move from Manitoba. There's an injury that happens. You get a whole bunch of jobs in Saskatchewan, and how do you find yourself, starting to get into martial arts or into fighting?
I had done little bits here and there over the years. Whenever there was something offered in Manitoba, I'd do like a 6-month judo thing, and then I'd do a 6 months of karate, but there was never really any more that ended up being offered. And it was always something that had interested me. And when I moved to Regina, I'd actually got as I was getting these job offers, I had actually had an offer. They told me to come down and do some training to do pro wrestling, which was something that my dad and I had actually always taken an hour off every Saturday at noon to watch Stampede Wrestling. And so it's something that I was quite familiar with. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of cool. And so I started training in 2000. I had my first match at the old Pile of Bones brawl at the Parliament buildings in Regina in 2001. So that took me, all over Winnipeg and Dauphin, Brandon, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, even one ill-fated trip up to LaLoche.
Oh my goodness!
There's a weekend I'll never get back.
My mom used to be, and my mother used to be the only nurse that worked that territory, and Callie Risling was the only RCMP out in those areas. And man, yeah, that's a tough place to be for a number.
Especially when you're a pro wrestler and you're the bad guy.
Everybody wants a piece of you.
I ended up getting a police escort out of town after the matches. The police came back into the dressing room and said, "Look, man, are you going home?" I'm like, "Well, I was thinking about it. It's what is it, 12, 13-hour drive from LaLoche, and it's midnight." And it's like, "Well, I really wouldn't mind sleeping." And they're like, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't stay here." And they actually, got all around me and walked me out to my truck and threw the lights on, and we flew out of town. They went with me for about 5 or 10 miles, and then kind of, okay, keep going, don't stop. I'm like, oh man. It was something to do with me hitting the chief of the reserve over the head with a cookie sheet during the match. That didn't go over well with the rest of the people at the show. But
was this with the Stampede Wrestling as an organization, or was it a different one?
No, it was with High Impact Wrestling out of Regina.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay, cool. I think a lot of us would have very, as kids growing up, from Stampede Wrestling and watching Ed Whalen and his catchphrase, "In the meantime and in between time, I'm Ed Whalen from Stampede Wrestling," and all that. And then High Impact. So you traveled all around Saskatchewan as a pro wrestler.
Yeah.
What were some of the, aside from the LaLoche story that I'm just like, oh my God. And I love the people out there, and my mom was there, but it's a tough place to be, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But what are some of the other stories that came about as you were wrestling around the provinces?
Just lots of fun. I did a couple shows in Winnipeg with Tatanka back in the day, and a show in Brandon and Dauphin with Jim the Anvil Neidhardt.
Oh, nice.
Who else? There was a few others, like Richard Pound, the old Stampede Wrestling Richard Pound, and the name of the announcer is completely blanking on me now for Stampede that I was working with, but he was from Regina as well, and he was always with Richard Pound there.
I remember being in high school and working at a California Fitness and walking to the gym one day and seeing Tatanka and Razor Ramon working out, and we were just like, what? And they're just, you know how that lifestyle, you know exactly how that lifestyle is. You still got to work out, you got to do it. You're tired, and but you always have people coming. They were awesome to sign photo autographs for us, and we didn't waste a lot of their time because they were all business. But that must have been
that's actually, now you mention that, it's something I still, a little unfinished business for me there. I believe Wavell Star and or the Dream Warrior, I went with them to Winnipeg for that show with Tatanka, and one of them has the signed picture of me and Tatanka that I've never actually got from him. I think I'm gonna have to get a hold of Wavell one of these days and just see if that's kicking around somewhere.
Well, Wavell's, we're a big fan of Wavell Star, and we haven't done any guys do just our wrestlers right now, which he is right now. But you know what? I talk to him every couple of weeks, so we'll see if we can find out where that is for you.
Yeah, that's half the memories, is just the car rides with Wavell and the Dream Warrior and whoever else was going. I know I had a whole lot of feuds over the years with Noah Mad. And he's actually still wrestling in Regina now. I saw the other day that he had a show. I think it was last weekend, and I just couldn't do it anymore. My body wasn't holding up to all that, and you know, I've always since then had a problem with people when they say that wrestling is fake, because it absolutely is not fake.
Yeah.
I'll go with it that it's planned. Absolutely, it's planned. But there's nothing fake about it, and I could have shown them the hundreds and hundreds of bruises on me to prove that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, it's true. You're 100% right, and I get that. Let's so you go, I don't want to do wrestling anymore. It's too tough. Let me get into MMA. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it started bridging over. It was actually when Jeff Wiley did the first UMC show in Regina. I heard about it coming up, and it was only about maybe 3 or 4 weeks prior to the event that I heard about it. And I thought, you know what? This is something that I'd always wanted to do. And so I kind of was seeing if there was any spots left in that one, but there wasn't. And I got a hold of Doug Finley at Flying Eagle Hapkido, and I started training with Doug there at the Hapkido place, and he did a lot of work to because he had never really trained anybody for MMA, and so we kind of did a lot of tests, and because of my size and whatnot, I remember them trying to teach me how to work off my back on the ground, and they actually had, I don't know if there was 3 or 4 of them piled on top of me, just to give me some weight to work out from underneath. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, I don't know if this is normal, but as it turns out, there isn't a whole lot of normal in any of the MMA training.
Especially when you're, like I said, the size of a pterodactyl. Like, how do you even find opponents? So I loved UMC one. I think AJ was in that card as well, and that one was actually the place where I got my passion for commentating, because Dennis Lawson and that was there. He was a doctor that trained with Jeff Wiley and I, and then Daryl Svensson was there, and they were the commentators. And I remember sitting there, and AJ was fighting some blonde kickboxer guy, and I went back and I watched him training in the hallway, right? Because that's what it was. It was at the Agrodome, I think, right?
It was at the
it's ridiculous
wholesale corral or whatever at the Agrodome, yeah.
And I remember I walked by and I found out that AJ and this is so long ago, AJ and the guy he was fighting both dated the same girl. and I was like, Dennis, Gerald, can I sit down and tell the story? And they were like, yeah, man, we don't even know what we're doing here. We're terrible. And so that's how that all started. They're awesome guys. And Dennis is a doctor now, and Daryl's a big family man, still black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But And yeah, I didn't the toilets back up at some point in the.
I wasn't even actually at that event.
Oh, okay,
I
okay,
missed that one. I was at UMC 2 and every one following that.
okay,
Yeah, like I said, it was only, I think it was 3 weeks prior to the event that I even heard about it.
okay. So you start moving into MMA. Talk to me about you fall in love with it. What's going on? What's the differences between wrestling and MMA? Considering
There's there's a lot of differences. There's the contact, there's the training. It's just more the technicalities and the knowing all the technical aspects of it, which in wrestling you kind of get the basics and then you put a lot of trust in the guy that you're wrestling with, whereas MMA you're kind of not putting any trust in anything except your own training.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so now you start. So when's the trend? Anything funny happen when you're in the ring doing MMA?
Oh, oh yeah. There's quite a few. I know there was one Saturday Night Fights event where the top rope buckle broke and it fell down halfway through. My first fight that I had, which was in Moose Jaw, I swear it was UMC 4. But I was fighting against another guy who was 300 pounds and a judo black belt. So there was, I had to cut 17 pounds the day of the fight to make weight at 330.
Oh my goodness.
And so it was 630 pounds just between the two of us in the ring. And I was pushing so hard, it actually slid the 2x12s out from underneath the floor. And once we finished the fight, the ref right away stopped me from walking over. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, you don't walk over there. The floor is gone. And I'm like, well, okay, that's good.
Thanks for letting me know.
Before I walk over and fall through the floor. And it's one of those trampoline breaks clips that you see on YouTube.
Oh man. And so how do you get into and you're a really acclaimed and a fantastic referee. We saw you do so many shows in Saskatchewan, and now you're with the commission in British Columbia, and you're at the XFFC, you're at Mamba, you're everywhere, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I did a couple of battlefield shows, one back in February and one last July in Vancouver, and I'm on the regular rotation now for the BC Athletic Commission here, and still throwing feelers out if they need people in Calgary or Red Deer. It's 7 hours to Calgary, so it's about almost the same as Regina. So there's still options around. It's Penticton's kind of in the middle of everywhere here, and so it's kind of in the middle of everywhere, but it's kind of far away from everywhere. So
yeah. And that's I don't know, man. There are times when I imagine you're so happy you're in the middle of nowhere, and other times you're like, oh, I got a show to do. It's going to take me a day to get there. But
yeah, well, and I've even done the same kind of things I used to do at that show that I did for Battlefield back in February. I left here in the morning and I drove to Coquitlam, hit Costco, and then I went to the event. I reffed the event, got done at just before midnight, and hopped back in the truck and drove home. Got home at 3:15 in the morning, just because I was too cheap to pay for a hotel. So I figured I'd just drive for 17 hours, I've done it before going to Cold Lake. I've reffed up in Cold Lake, and I've done that in a day, there and back. It's just asinine, but...
So I got to ask this question because when you say I stopped off at Costco, I'm like, what'd you get? Like, I did because dude, the guy your size, and I don't, it's just who you are, man. You're that big, you got to have your calories, right? And when you stop off, and I don't want to.
There's nothing special I got. It's just I was in Coquitlam early enough, and I hit over to Burnaby to the Costco, and I think I got some golf gloves, and it's just I might be big and do this other stuff, but I'm still just a regular guy, and I've still got people at home that I need to, get stuff for, and I'm still a man and a father and everything else.
You're not going to tell me how much you eat?
I'm just a lot bigger than other men.
I'm a dude, I'm a fan of your size, and I'm in awe of it all the time. Whenever we're working together, I'm always looking up, going, "Geez, let's be good to this guy."
Well, and that's the thing. The BC Commission, this last Mamba event, I got there and the commissioner started giggling as soon as I got there, and I'm like, "Mike, what's up?" He's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see this." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You've got the main event, and it's a women's match." I'm like, "Okay." And he's starting to laugh so hard that he can hardly talk. I'm like, "What?"
Bantamweights, 125ers.
Oh, if they would have been that big, it wouldn't have been so bad. It was 5'1", 105, and 5'3", 106. Yeah, it looked like I was reffing toddlers. Oh man, there's actually, I believe on the Mamba page, I might have shared it on my Facebook as well. There is a video of me in the ring with these girls, and these girls were awesome fighters. Like they really, really impressed me. But just, to step back and look at it, from where I was, it was just two fighters going at it. But then I watched the video, and it's like, oh my. Okay, they're up to my waist.
It's great to see what BFL is doing and what Jamak's doing over there. And Jay, I'd love to see it, and that's awesome. But I am going to link the video to the page so people can enjoy the size difference, because that would be awesome. Yeah. So you also, as a referee and someone sort of that's so entrenched in it, you also did stuff with Big John McCarthy, and you kind of became his friend, didn't you? Talk to me about the training for reffing.
Yeah, I did the first judging course in Winnipeg in, I think it was February of 2010. And then about 4 months later, I flew down to LA and did the reffing course at his old school in Valencia, just north of LA there. It was a fantastic 4 days, and I got my certification there. And then I ended up going back about 6 months later, 8 months later. I went back and just helped out with a course that he was running, just wherever he needed a hand. But I figured the more I can do stuff and the more I can help him out, the more I'm going to learn, the better ref I'm going to be. So, I paid for my way down there just to do another course, just to help out. And it was a lot of fun. There was actually one of the people in that course was Frank Trigg.
Nice.
And he's doing a ton of stuff with announcing and everything now. And I completely blank on his name, but the guy who used to be the commissioner of the California Athletic Commission, he's from Oregon. I want to say it's George. I'm just terrible with names, but there's been a couple good guys, they're very well-known names that I've been sitting there and they've been asking me questions about how to ref, and I'm looking at them and going, Frank Twinkle Toes Trigg, like, what are you asking me for? You know way more, but he's a fighter. The fighters don't necessarily know as much as the refs do about the actual rules and how things are able to happen in the ring.
Well, it's funny too. I agree with what you're saying, because and you probably, when you first started reffing, maybe you did or maybe you didn't, but you have to change your mentality, because what happens is if you've been a fighter and you walk into the ring, you get the goosebumps, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh, and then sometimes if you can't realize why you're there, there's this natural process of, I'm going to the ring, something else changes, and you go to fight mode, and you're not even thinking about doing the right stuff. Like, is that something you might see with young refs going to fighter?
You'll get real, and that's something we really work on. Like, I know when I was helping with the courses and whatnot, was to really teach the referees to keep their peripheral vision going, and actually to do a lot of like turning the head while watching, but just to, otherwise you get that tunneling.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely be tunneled in on something and not see the other end of the body that's doing something or that's caught up or whatever. So it's a lot of just teaching how to move in the ring, not even teaching the rules. I think anybody who's watched more than 3 or 4 MMA events knows the rules. And especially for fighters, once they get to pro levels, you know, we don't have to go over the rules with them, really. We go over just as a refresher. But there's no questions. You know, there might be explanations of exactly how we interpret the rules in different jurisdictions. And I know you get into Alberta, and every city you ref in has a different set of rules. It's kind of the Wild West there in Alberta, and it used to be the way it was in BC before they went to the provincial commission, which now is the same rules for everywhere here.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, how do you feel? Let me ask this question, because you come from understanding the commission in Saskatchewan and the fact that they are so process heavy and very specific how they do things. Then you come to BC and the commission here, and I love Mike and those guys because they're like, we're going to do amateur, pro, kickboxing, MMA, everything on the same card. We're going to build this sport. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You guys are awesome. And so does that change? Do you have to get certified in all those, or do you only do a couple, or what is that change?
Well, basically, once you get your certification with Big John, it's more of a recognition. It depends on the commission as to whether they're even requiring that stuff. Like, there's lots of guys that, you know, will do the course and maybe not be successful at it, but they learn so much doing the course that then, you know, they can, you know, work on amateur fights to increase their skill set so that they could go back and do the course again, and their skill set would be that much higher that they would pass it at the pro level. But I know the Mamba event I worked at was a newer referee that I was working with, and he did the like, we split the amateur fights, but then I did all the pro fights because he wasn't certified for pro. BC is very rule oriented, and they really follow a lot of very strict procedures when it comes to certification of officials and stuff like that.
I think you'd have to if you're going to have events that have everybody fighting at different styles, right?
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, and I've done several. Oh, I forget what the number's at now. I do have it written down somewhere of all the fights that I've done, and I think it's somewhere in the 40 to 50 kickboxing matches, probably 30 Muay Thai, plus a couple hundred in the amateur and pro MMA. Plus, I was certified as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu official through the IBJJF.
And here's one thing that I didn't realize, that I learned from a few people that took John's course. It's not easy. You don't just show up and do it. It's actually pretty tough.
I believe, well, I know when I was doing it, I think it was around a 30% pass rate.
Yeah. So,
which you think about it, it's like, ooh, you know, that's terrible. But no, it's just that in depth. And, you know, he doesn't want just anybody in that ring, you know, responsible for A, fighter's life, and B, a fighter's livelihood. You know, you make a wrong call with a pro fight, you know, that fighter maybe was depending on that fight for paying their rent and everything for that month or that 2, 3, 6 months. Right. And you can completely change a person's career if you make a bad call. So he really puts a lot of weight into his certifications and wants to make sure that he only has the best and the highest trained people that can carry around his command certification.
Yeah, and some of that stuff you can't even help. Wasn't it UFC 2 where John McCarthy stopped the fight and he ran, and it may have happened twice, to take a fighter off to stop damage because he wasn't ended up breaking the guy's nose?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's half the interesting part about doing one of John's courses is you get all the background on every single rule that there is and the reason why every rule is there, because John was there for every one of them. And he is like an absolute walking encyclopedia of all the fights that I swear he remembers absolutely every fight that he's ever reffed, and he's reffed thousands upon thousands of fights. But he can literally bring up every fight and the high point in it, the things that he could have done better, the funny parts, everything else. He's an absolute wealth of knowledge for learning about the foundation of MMA.
Yeah, and I remember you saying too. I think you guys sort of hit it off. You got invited to his 50th birthday party, didn't you?
I did, yes. That was about a year after I'd gone down there for those 2 times, and yeah, he actually invited us back for his 50th party, and I was when they asked if I wanted to come, I was like, well, I don't care what I'm doing, I'm canceling it because that's something I don't want to miss out on. And it was just a wonderful night just at his gym there, but it was the whole red carpet, and you walk up and they do the pictures in front of the background and everything, and you walk in, and I'm walking around, and oh yeah, there's Randy Couture, there's Andrei Arlovsky, and I got pictures with Florian and Buffer, and it was just kind of surreal as to, wow, here I am in a room with all these guys, and all the tap out guys were all there.
Crazy, cool.
And yeah, it was a really, really cool night. And and I think I went back once more after that as well. Just we were I was in LA, and I went for a visit, and just went out for supper with John and Elaine, and they're just really, really, really nice people. And I ended up helping with a course after that in Lethbridge, and then when we did a certification in Regina, I helped with that course as well. So
yeah. That's awesome. It's always great to see how friendships develop through fighting and MMA and UFC. If you've seen any HA's videos recently, watching the Jose Aldo fight, him and BJ Penn are like no buddies. So that's great. We're gonna get him on the show, and being able to really people that you've looked up to, being able to work with them and talk to them, like Din Thomas is one of my heroes, Jeremy Horn, of those guys, to be able just to say, hey, let's have a conversation about, what's going on, how it happened, and the history, and then what happens next. It's really special, and I'm glad to see you're in it in a different way than I for sure am, and I never got invited to LA to the red carpet stuff yet. So that's
well,
awesome.
The fun thing was, and it's too bad we hadn't talked beforehand, but I believe it was Jeremy Horn was actually the guy, was the only guy that Big John restarted standing from mount. Jeremy was mounted on somebody and not doing anything. He was just basing out and just holding there. And John kept saying, you got to do something, you got to do something. And they ended up standing up, and I don't recall who he was fighting or what the outcome of the fight was, but I know John asked him after, and he says, dude, I kept telling you to move. And I believe Jeremy's words were, dude, I was on top of him. I never thought I'd get that. I wasn't going to lose that for anything.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like then that's the kind of thing with John that you'll get, is just so many stories on these awesome fights that he's had and that he's officiated.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now we go into interesting conversations on this podcast, and we're going to wrap up here in a little bit. But one of the questions that I always find interesting, that I ask pro fighters, MMA amateurs, all those guys, and their journey into martial arts is all there. But I really feel like we're sometimes products of our family. And one of the lessons that I always like to, or one of the questions I like to ask is, what's one of the most valuable lessons you learned from your family growing up?
I think probably one of the biggest things is what you've done or where you've been doesn't shape where you're going. Where you are currently can guide where you're going, but there's absolutely nothing stopping you from being anything you want to be going forward. And anything that's happened in the past doesn't mean anything, because that's exactly what it is the past. It's something to learn from, but nothing to cling on to, and to just always, always be looking forward at how you can better yourself and better your life around you.
That's amazing. Was that, and I love that, because if I summarize it there, the past doesn't define you. You can be anything you want tomorrow. Is that sort of, or even today?
I know, I think it was about 2 years ago, I half made up a little saying. I think I made it up. I don't think I read it somewhere. And what was it? I'm not the man I am today because of who I was. I am the man I am today because of who I am. And just, it doesn't matter your past. Lots of people get hung up on their past, saying that they can't do something because of this, because of it. No, you reset your course, you refocus, and you move forward.
I love that so much. And I think I remember watching someone else talking about it, and they were like, go do a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. And what do you mean? He said, listen, you don't know what you're passionate about, but go try a bunch of stuff, fail it. Every time you fail, you're going to get pushed along a path that will take you to your best self. But if you sit there and try to figure out what it is without doing anything, you're never going to find it. You got to go find out.
Absolutely. And, well, like I said, growing up in a town of 325 people, I didn't have the opportunities at sport, at everything else, which a guy of my size growing up in a city would have had all kinds of opportunities. I'll guarantee I would have been playing football, who knows what level, but
football, basketball,
everything else. But there wasn't even the teams. Yeah. I've still to this day never played more than a kind of a scrimmage of football. I've never played, and I remember back in about 2002 being at Craven and having Frank McChrystal from the Regina Rams coming up to me there and offering me a 50% scholarship on the spot. And I'm like, dude, I've never played football. He goes, I don't care. You're big enough. I can just put you in a hole. And I'm not taking him up on the offer, but it was that kind of thing that it was like, okay, no, hang on. I do have opportunities. And that was when my thought process had started changing to thinking, well, no, I'm not defined by how I grew up and what I learned. I've learned really good basics and work ethic. And it's just a matter now of kicking down the doors. I don't open them. I kick them right down. And take a little bit of the door frame out so I don't have to.
Do you have an agent yet here? This is Hollywood North, man. And like I'm telling you, the way you're talking right now, and I know you're doing your regular job and then you're doing all this other stuff, but I have a couple friends that do stuff, and they're just like, you're a bit far to be doing auditions every day, but hey, you never know, right?
I haven't had an agent since I was in Regina, and I did have an agent back probably 10, 15 years ago, and I did a few movies. And if you remember the Ryan Reynolds movie Just Friends, it was you'll have to look it up now. And
now I'm doing it.
You watch the first, I think it's about 10 minutes of the show is a flashback from when he was in high school. And you watch that section and you're going to see a whole lot of this face with about 35 to 40 pounds on me. So, and it looks like about 20 years less time. But I'm fairly often in the scenes of that, the first section there, wearing my kind of a light colored plaid shirt. And you watch for it, you'll see me in there. And I actually did a lot of talking with Ryan Reynolds when we were doing that movie, and he was saying that I reminded him of his brother, who's I believe 6'8", and we had a really good time there.
It's too bad, Ryan. It's really too bad Ryan Reynolds' career hasn't taken off at all, isn't it?
No, it's a real downer.
Yeah, I think maybe Yeah, maybe we'll get to figure out how to get you the next Deadpool. But Phil, this was it's amazing to reconnect with you. Thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you around British Columbia at the various events. Yeah, man, I just want to say thanks for the inspirational end there to that, because if we're going to give anybody the idea, it's like just go do stuff, and you'll find out what doesn't work, and it's not failure because it guides you towards you want to go. But thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. Thanks for having me on here, Jeff. And like I said, just make sure you pass the word on that anybody can do anything that they set their mind to.
Perfect. We'll talk soon, my friend.
You bet.
Hey guys, thanks again for your support of fighters, coaches, and fathers. If you liked what you saw, subscribe by clicking the button on the left. And if you want more, check out my interview with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and 4-time world champion in the long jump, Jan Stein. Look forward to talking soon. Bye for now.